Hello everyone, I just want to give you a little bit of warning about today's episode, and that's that the microphone does cut out in certain places in the first half of the episode. So what I've done is on YouTube I'm just going to add a few annotations to try and cover what I talk about, but for the most part you should be able to follow along by just watching, and if you read the annotations as you go. I apologize for that, it was just setting up a hotkey that happened to be the exact same key I use for one of the debug commands in the game, which is F1, to show the enemy motion paths. So whenever I show the enemy motion paths, I either start talking or I stop talking, but I will try to cover that stuff with the annotations. So thank you, and I hope you enjoy the episode. Hello everyone, and welcome to Blue Tengu's live game development show, where we show everything that goes into making a game from concept to completion. If you've ever wanted to make a game, we hope this will help lower the barrier to entry, maybe give you the nudge needed to try it yourself. Even if you don't want to make a game, we hope you'll find some entertainment value in what we're doing here. All of the information about where you can find us is in the Twitch info down below, or in our YouTube profile for those of you who are catching us later. But just in case, we're at www.bluetengu.com, btengu on Twitter, facebook.com Bluetengu Studio, youtube.com Bluetengu Studio for those of you who are watching the live stream with me now, and Twitch TV Bluetengu for those of you who are watching us on YouTube. If you've missed any of the episodes in the past, you can always catch them over at YouTube, but you shouldn't have any trouble following along even if you haven't seen them. For those of you who haven't seen the show on Twitch or YouTube before, my name's Eric. I'm a game designer living in Japan who's trying to show you everything that goes into making a game for 2 hours a week, including all of the ums and ahs and awkward debugging moments, of which I have plenty. The reason I'm showing it all, as opposing to making the game first and scripting out a tutorial, is because I want to lower the barrier to field of making a game, and I hope inspire you to go out and try it yourself. Thank you to everyone who stopped by last week, and all of you who've watched the videos on YouTube. For those of you here with me now on Twitch, feel free to drop suggestions or ask me questions at any time. I do have to warn you that there's like a 30-second lag going on right now with Twitch, so if it takes a little time for me to get to your questions, that's why, in addition to the fact that I'm working. So I may not be able to answer your questions right away because I am working, but I'll try to get to them, and if I can't, please send me a private message here or leave a comment on our site or YouTube video, and I'll do my best to address it next time. If any of you are out there making something and you don't mind showing it off, send me a link to your stuff. I'd love to see it. Anyway, at this time for 2 hours every week, I come onto Twitch TV to work on the game Project Spaghetti, a top-down 2D cowboy shooter where the bullets fired bounce around the screen with a pinball mechanic. Last week I started celebrating Halloween a little early because it's my favorite holiday, by kicking off work on the game's graveyard level, whipping up some rough-looking trees, ghosts, bats, tombstones, and a bell, which you can hit to ring and kill ghosts. And that's the mechanic that differentiated the graveyard level from the others. The other thing that's going to differentiate the graveyard from, the town level that I have so far is the kind of enemies that are in it. And although I got the basics working last week, I left most of the actual game implementation for this week, so that's where I'm going to start. So, first things first, probably pop up my desktop and head on over to Trello.com, which is where I keep my task list. You can see this at any time by looking up. Probably the easiest way, as I always say, is Trello and Project Spaghetti as keywords in Google, and it'll pop right up. Otherwise, you can just use this link up here, and if you're watching the YouTube video later, I usually post it in an annotation. Probably going to be around here because it's a nice wide open blue space. But for episode 17, which is this one, I'm going to first add some enemy nodes, movement nodes, to the graveyard level. And the reason I'm going to do that first is because my plan is to have the ghosts, when you ring the bell with a bullet, that allows you to kill the ghosts, which is fine, but I kind of want to have a risk-reward system to anything that I implement in the game to make it more interesting and to give everything kind of a strategic layer. So the problem with ringing the bell just constantly is that when you do ring the bell, the ghosts are going to turn into an angry form, which comes straight for you, whereas if you aren't ringing the bell, they're just kind of wandering around. And to do that, I'm going to need to add more enemy nodes because I could have them find the player and come straight at the player, but there could be a problem with that if the player is hiding in like the shadow of some place that enemies can't go. So I probably want to pick the movement node that's closest to the player and have the ghosts go towards that, so that at least if they can't run right into the player, they can at least go really close to the player. Once I get that done, that's part of the ghosts gameplay parameters, but once I get that done, the next thing is to actually make them pick the closest node to the player, run to that for however many seconds the bell is ringing, and switch back and forth between the different modes. I also have bats in the game. I did use a little bit of overtime to add those bats. Let me go over here. So I did add a couple of things, like I do have the bats spawning at like bat nodes in the tree, which is normally like the background, but I'll show you when I get into the game. And the bats also have some random movement involved as well. I also changed the UI text color to white because the graveyard level is much darker than the town level, so I added something in GameMaker to switch between black and white text depending on which one's more appropriate, more visible. I also changed the pickups. Before I had them hard-coded as coordinates, but I've changed those to nodes so that I can adjust them just on the map screen. And I also have the ghost actually doing damage to the player when they come into contact, and they have a little sound effect and everything else. So let's jump right into it because there is quite a bit to do. Also, this last task, whether I get to it or not, not sure, but I've been noticing I did set it up so that the bullets don't bounce around forever. And when they get to the red stage, which is like the final stage and the fastest speed, they bounce for a number of times and then the bullets disappear, which is fine, but it kind of looks like a bug if there's nothing actually happening when the bullets disappear. So I kind of want to have them add a strategic layer to that, for example, by having them explode when they finish, which probably means I have to have them flash a little bit before they explode or something like that too, but if I get to that. It's not very Halloween-y, so if I don't get to that in this Halloween episode, I'm not going to worry about it, because I do have 3.5 hours worth of tasks in here, though they should go pretty quick. So let's jump into GameMaker and show you where we are now. If it fires up, hopefully. Okay, good. Okay, so where I'm at now. This is the level that you've always seen in all of the other episodes, the town level. Pretty straightforward. You can duck to make bullets go faster. You can get extra points by having the bullets going faster when they hit the enemies. And here's the second level, which is the graveyard level. As you can see in the upper right corner, you can actually see like the score and high score and all that stuff now. The ghosts, if you just try to shoot them right off the bat, the bullets just go through them. So you have to hit the bell, which does two things. Makes the ghosts where you can hit them with bullets, and it brings a bunch of bats down. Yeah. So that's where I'm at now. So the first thing will be to go into the graveyard level. Now let's see if I can move things around there. Okay. Is to go into the graveyard level here, and these move nodes, these little like pink triangles that I have here, are all the places that the enemies pick to move. So if the player happens to be here, even if the ghost chooses the closest one, it's not going to be very threatening because they're not going to come that close to the player. And to be honest, gamers are smart, so they'll start to figure out that all they have to do is stand in these spots and they're always safe, which is no good. So I do want to create more of these, at least for this map, probably for other ones too, to be honest. And the only thing I have to be careful about is to make sure that these nodes aren't going to be in places where enemies can't go, because otherwise they'll pick a node or they can't go to it, and then they'll just kind of get stuck. And I should probably put a system in place to handle that as well. So let me add that task. Won't get to it this episode, but that's actually going to be pretty valuable because I don't want to have errors in the game where an enemy's just sitting there. So that's going to look pretty bad. Oops. Let's put it there. Oh, we'll just do them by hand, I guess. Not a big deal. It's going to be a lot faster than typing in coordinates for all of them. And to be honest, if I do get a system in place where the enemy can ignore in order to move somewhere if they can't reach it and switch tracks, then I could probably also do it so that they do make a beeline for the player if they can see the player, and just pick the closest node if they don't see the player. And that's actually probably the smarter way to go. Then they'll be really threatening, which is good. But there we go. I think that's plenty of enemy nodes at least. So now the ghost should move around a lot freer. Let me just make sure I haven't introduced any bugs. Skip to the next level. Okay, let's see what happens. So we've got ghosts just kind of wandering around, and as soon as I hit that bell, they're all making a beeline for the player. I guess I'm not unsetting their angry state, so once you hit that bell, you're pretty much hosed for the rest of the level. Let's see, I gotta make sure that the node part works. It looked like it did, actually. No. Yeah, because here's the problem, is when the player's in here, there's no path to the player. Which means that that if EM pathing is not working properly. So I have to go in and fix that. I also have to actually turn off the angry setting. Begin step if the bell is ringing. If bell ring is equal to 1, otherwise set this to 0. So bell ring is probably never being set to 0. That would be a problem. Although I do have an alarm here that sets bell ring to 0. And there's certainly something resetting the bats. Global ring duration. Yeah, I wonder why it's not resetting the ghost's behavior. It might also be related to that thing where the ghosts aren't giving up on the player and picking a new node. Because it seems like it's only coming into here once. Yeah, I'm actually kind of confused as to why that's happening. So here's one of those ums and ahs and awkward debugging moments I always talk about at the start of the show. Okay, so the turning EM angry to 0 part is working fine, but I think now I know what the problem is. More information always helps you debug. That was a good example of it, because now that I know that the ghosts are not angry when the problems are popping up, it's because whatever I've got in here is not enough to compensate for what I've changed up here. And I understand why. It's because this stuff is designed to work only if the ghosts are constantly moving according to this, which means they're always going to reach their destination at some point, and that destination is being reset to player when they become angry. But then when they calm down, it hasn't changed the fact that this is still their destination. So even though they're not angry, they're still trying to get to here. But there's nothing that says, you've reached your destination, pick another node or anything like that. So I do need to compensate for that. And probably the way I have to do it is, if they are angry, I don't know, there's got to be a bit more descriptive variable than this to use, but I'm just going to go with this. And I'm going to create another condition which says, if the ghosts are not angry but this is set to true, then I have to do something different. And what that thing is going to be here, I would imagine. I may not even need an else if in here, to be honest. Or, yeah, I could just set another or in here, probably. And I should probably comment that. That's what I can use for my description. Calm. It's going to be much more helpful months from now when I'm looking at this and trying to figure it out. Let's go with false. EM calm is false because they're angry. And whatever reason it has for coming in here, it's going to be calm. And I also need to add that here. And the default is true. That should get them to switch tracks when the bell stops ringing. Oh yes, it does. Yeah, that's actually a pretty good figure, because it does make them about as fast as the player. It's definitely going to make it so that if there's a lot of ghosts and bats and everything on the screen, the player's going to have trouble. And I just wanted to show you that the ghosts do die and have like a sound effect going on. When they hit the player, but that also showed me another bug that I have in my code. When the ghosts hit a player, I am setting this kill count up. I don't want to change the score because the player's not doing anything really. EM dead to 1. I do want to set EM dead to 1. But I do need to keep track of the fact that the ghost died, because otherwise the player's not going to be able to move to the next level. So that's one thing I have to do. I also have to say the enemy is dead. Okay. So that should at least allow the player to progress to the next level, even if, you know, the whole reason they're able to progress is because they just ran into every ghost. And let's see, was there anything else I needed to do? Yes, there is. One more thing I need to do for the ghost. I'm going to jump in here, show you what that is. At the moment, I'm only using transparency to show the difference between the angry ghost and the calm ghost, but here's the problem. Visually, there's not a whole lot of difference. Yeah, they are transparent when they're not angry, and yeah, they're solid when they are angry, which is good information to have. But the color's exactly the same, so information-wise, it's not that useful to the player. I do need to change their color a little bit when they get angry, or, you know, up the transparency on them when they're not angry. So that's going to take a little sprite tweaking here. Opacity 255. And yeah, I see what the problem is. Basically, I'm counteracting what I've been doing by making them transparent when they're friendly. I'm using a white color, but making them transparent when they're friendly, which makes them look kind of grayish. And when they're unfriendly, they're a solid gray, so they kind of look the same. Do want to change that. And since I made these sprites in Photoshop, I'm going to go out there to make those changes, because I may change them at a later date too. So let's load up the ghost, make that fix. This is why it's important to use rough graphics when you're just doing the game start, because otherwise you have no idea what's going to happen. So let's just keep track. This is the angry version. This is the friendly version. I think the friendly version is fine as white, and if I make it semi-transparent, it turns a little gray. That's fine. It's just this that needs to change. I probably want to go with a reddish color if I can, but one limitation I've set for myself on this whole project, Project Spaghetti, is that I only use the Commodore 64 color palette, which is probably why I picked gray in the first place. But if I pick a red color and make it transparent or semi-transparent, it might look all right. This red's going to be a little too strong. You know, as you can see here, that's very strong. But if it's semi-transparent, it might not be that bad. Pink's not very threatening, but if I make it semi-transparent, it might be alright. There's also the option of like a sky blue, which isn't bad, but it doesn't look very angry. And then there's this purple color, which isn't too bad. But I always associate angry with red, so I'm going to try red first. And this is the unfriendly ghost, the very un-Casper ghost. So let's see, load that up. And do I have some place where I'm setting the alpha? Or was I doing that out here? I think I was doing it out here, wasn't I? Let me check. I get the feeling there was some other place that I was setting that. Draw. If it's going to be anywhere, it's going to be draw. Yeah, that's fine. Sprite index is equal to sprite angry, so that's fine. Maybe I was doing it up here. Let me just see what it looks like. Yeah, actually red's not that bad. Just as is. But I do probably want to make some transparency in it. Yeah, so this one's opacity 128. That's fine. But why is this one not semi-transparent? Yeah, that's for drawing colors, so I must have been doing it out in Photoshop, right? If I wasn't doing it out in Photoshop, I probably should have been doing it out in Photoshop anyway. It might be a little too transparent, but we'll see. Alright, well let's try these sprites. Yeah, I guess I'll save it. This is the unfriendly version. And the friendly version. Yep. Okay, let's replace those sprites. I'm going to need to change these, so let me keep track of those numbers. 616, 218, because I've got a unique collision box for them, and when I reload the sprite in GameMaker, it deletes that for it. And I don't want that. So ghost friendly, it's centered, but I do need to change the collision to this. 616, 218, 2. 18. And, it's a good reminder, why I do this manually is because if you take a look at this box, it's kind of hard to see because it's so small. But the way the box is now, it encapsulates the entire sprite so that if the player just happens to hit that corner where there's actually no ghost, they still get hit. And that's going to be kind of frustrating for the players. So I tend to make the collisions a bit smaller than the enemy to give the player just a little bit of wiggle room. And that's fine. I just want to make sure that I'm not setting it transparent somewhere. I don't think I am. Draw self. Yeah, just drawing self, so it should be fine. Let's see what these ghosts look like now. Yeah, the friendly one's fine. And the unfriendly one looks okay too. Okay. That looks good. I think we've got our ghosts pretty well doing what we want them to do for now. So I did add nodes to the graveyard level, so they have more choices to chase after the player. Did the ghosts' gameplay parameters. Now let's work on those bats. The bats seem to be alright, but unfortunately they're moving random, so there's no way to guarantee to show what the problem is, but the problem is they're picking random angles and moving down them, which is fine, but when they hit like a tombstone or when they hit a bell or something like that, they run into the collision and then they just kind of have to shimmy around it, which doesn't look that great. I mean, it does get them to the bottom of the screen, which is fine, but it's just kind of, I don't know, it's kind of flawed. So they should try to avoid, those obstacles as much as possible. So in a way, I need to have the bats doing like a movement system as well, where it's not just, calculating angles and moving them off and stuff like that randomly, because you never know what might be in the way. So I do need to think of some way I've been streaming this whole time without voice. Wow. I guess I'll just run with it. Sorry for those of you who are watching this show and just watching, these giant silent sections. I'll try to add some annotations on YouTube to make up for it. Maybe, just explain just in little snippets what I'm doing in those silent sections. Hopefully that'll be enough. I mean, you probably get the picture by watching, watching me work. So I'm not exactly sure which sections had volume and which ones didn't, so hopefully my annotations are enough to tell you that, in the first half of the show, I added a bunch of nodes to the graveyard level. In fact, let me walk you through the changes I've made just in case my voice didn't get picked up for some of those sections. So like in this graveyard level, up till now, I've only had a couple of these like enemy move nodes, but now there's a whole bunch of them, so the ghosts can more freely pick where they move. Also, when the ghosts get angry, they pick either the player to run to, or if they can't get to the player, they pick the node closest to the player. And yeah, that microphone's making me paranoid. Well, I know what it is. I know exactly what's going on here. Let me fix this, because I'm going to cause a lot of problems for myself. Yes, I need to get rid of this. Thought I was going to be smart by having the mute button be on like an easy to access key like F1. Unfortunately, F1 is one of the debug keys for my game, which means I was shutting off the volume over and over again. I will avoid that in the future. So now at least I don't have to worry about Open Broadcaster bugs. Sorry, Open Broadcaster, it was my fault. But to show you where we are in the game, right now I've got the graveyard level, and I've got the ghosts, when they're friendly, just moving to random nodes, just like the cowboys do. But when I hit the bell, they try to go right after the player until that bell stops ringing. And gameplay-wise, the only time you can hit these ghosts is when a bullet is hitting that bell. The other disadvantage for hitting the bell is that a bunch of bats will come down, and that makes it much more difficult to deal with. So, right now, I do want to fix the bat behavior a little bit if I can, because right now, when the bats come down, they look alright when they're brushing the sides of like bumpers and stuff as they're trying to make their way down, but when they're on top, they just kind of shimmy around it, which is not so good. That's empty for now. So it's this stuff. It's the bat movement thing that I have. And just to double check, yes, my mic is still working. Let's see. So right now, I've got decide left, right randomness, and I tend to make them move to the left if they're on the right side of the screen, and I make them move right if they're on the left side of the screen, and if they're in the middle, they can kind of freely move around. So that's what this stuff is. And this global bat shift frequency, what this does is it says the number of seconds between, the time the bat chooses a new direction. And here's the code where they're shimmying around the bumper. It's saying like x plus equals bat x offset. So maybe I want them to move, instead of just slowly kind of shifting around the bumper, I want them to move faster around the bumper. So maybe doubling it by 2. So if I do it this way, the fact that they're not moving in a diagonal or down direction means that they should have more freedom to move left and right because they're going straight in that direction. So if that's the case, then they should be able to move faster in that direction because they're going straight in that direction. Unfortunately, the bat movement is random, so it's going to be rather difficult to test to make sure this is working. Yeah, that's no good. They're just moving faster in general. So I must have misunderstood that. Oh, if not, place meeting equals bumper. If not, place meeting equals bumper, then move down Y. Oh, I see. Got it. Yeah, okay. So what I probably want to do is set up something in here. In addition to BATX offset, let's call it bat bumper dodge. Set it to false by default. Whether the bat needs to dodge a bumper. And if they need to dodge a bumper, it's because it's below them. Make sure I reset that. So if this is true, you know, business as usual would be this version. And actually, I can get away with much less like logic and stuff here too. If I do, instead of true and false, I set this to 1 by default. And I double it to 2 up here. Then I don't need to do an if-else down here. I just have to say times bat bumper dodge. Because by default it'll be 1, which means I just use the same offset as always, but if it is dodging and it's 2, then it moves quicker to the right or left to get around that bumper. And again, this is going to be random, so it's going to be kind of hard to test, but hopefully. Yeah, they still kind of get stuck on stuff. And they just seem to be moving faster in general overall, which is not good. So I'm doing something wrong here. Oh, this is why. I was doing the exact opposite of what I wanted to do. So if there's no bumper, then it's 1, and if there is a bumper, it's 2. It's because I was using that not, throwing myself off with my own logic, so now they should behave a little more normally. Yeah, now they're back to being normal. And if they run into a bumper below them, they should shimmy around it much quicker. Yeah, okay. I saw a little bit of it on that round. There we go. That was a good example. If you're watching the video, you saw that bat hit the bell and then kind of quickly shift to the left and jump down to get around that bumper, so that's exactly the behavior I wanted. And I think that's fine. The bat movement looks okay. One thing about that bell that kind of bugs me right now is that if I do set a bullet in between these two places, you know, just kind of a constant stream of bats and ghosts is going on, which I guess is okay. It's not bad, but it just kind of feels a little too intense. Well, alright, if ghosts are just going to constantly move in through there. Oops. Not making my job easy here. Seriously. Yeah, it just feels like the waves of bats are kind of intense, but maybe not so much. I don't know. I was just thinking about that bell cooldown, like, because as soon as it finishes ringing, you can hit it again, which means you can just constantly send out ghosts. And to be honest, the ghosts are not red as long as I'd want them to, so I probably just want to expand out the time that bell is ringing. And I think I have a global variable in here, hopefully. Ring duration. Yep. So right now it's 3 seconds of ringing before it calms down again, so let's maybe change it to 5. And see what happens. And 5 feels just a bit too long. So let's try 4. It is usually like these small little numbers that make all the difference. Like just 5 felt too long, like the red ghosts are just kind of chasing me way too long. Even 4 feels a little bit too long. Let's go with 3.5. Subtle tweaks, but make all the difference in gameplay. You want it just long enough where you have to run from the ghost and you have a chance to shoot him if you want. Yeah, that feels about right. Yeah, the ghosts are kind of chasing me for about the right amount of time. It's really hard to test when the bats keep hitting the bullet on me. Just kind of want to see how many waves, how the waves of bats behave. Yeah, that's actually a pretty good spacing. By the time the bats are getting to the bottom of the screen, a new wave kind of comes in from the top. So yeah, that 0.5 seconds really made all the difference in making this level just feel smoother. So I think that's pretty good. So the bat gameplay parameters I think are fine. Let's see, bullets explode when they finish the red bounces. Okay, so this is the last thing I wanted to do, which was when the bullets, you know, when they bounce back and forth, they start out gray, then they turn to light blue, dark blue, yellow, orange, red, and then they kind of just disappear when they become red. The problem with that is it kind of looks like a bug, like it just looks like the bullet just kind of disappeared. And so what I could do is have it flash before it disappears and just leave it at that, but you know, it's a good chance to throw in kind of a gameplay mechanic, which is to have them explode and do kind of an area damage when they finish off. So that might actually be more than half an hour worth of work, but let's try it. Let's see, load sprite, edit sprite. Yeah, and actually just cycling through these images to show that it's about ready to explode on its next bounce is not a bad idea. So let's go down to bullet. Bounces 0. Step. Good chance to comment my code here. Okay, so this is the part that's destroying the bullet. let's change that to an else if. No, let's keep it in order. Let's keep it in order. Let's not go from highest to lowest. That'll be safer. So if the bounces is greater than the max, then the bullet gets destroyed. This is also where I'm going to want the explosion to happen. And in this case, I want the animation. I want the bullet to actually animate and change colors and stuff. So let's see, what do I have to do for that? Where am I doing something like that? Probably with player. In the draw function, maybe? Yeah, here we go. So image speed. Okay. So if it's on its last bounce, it'll start to flash, and when it gets to here, it's going to have to explode. So now I need an explosion. I think GameMaker might have a simple one for that. Yes, it does. Okay. That's pretty much exactly what it should look like. Size 2, we'll go size 2. And I don't want to use just C red because I don't know what color that is. I want to use global C64 red so that it uses the Commodore palette red. And let's see what this looks like. It's not actually going to do any extra area of effect damage. That would be the next step. But just to make sure that it flashes and kind of blows up with just a red flash of some sorts. Hopefully no enemy interrupts it. Let's see if we can speed it up a bit. There it is. Whoa. Okay. Well, that's a huge explosion. That's a little too big. That like took up the whole screen. Since I'm not Jerry Bruckheimer, I'm gonna shrink that down a little bit. I wonder if I can use this size, like if I can do like 0.5 or something. Let's see what it says. Let's see if I can get away with 0.5. I'm not sure I can, but if I can, it's worth it because that explosion effect was crazy big. Actually, the graveyard level is probably an easier place to do this. So the bullet's getting faster and faster and faster. It's going to turn red. And flash and boom. Okay, that's actually the right amount. So now it's just an area of effect damage thing. Let's see. Probably the easiest way to do this is just going to be rather than working with collision, because if the collision's not there from the start, and I suddenly have this collision that I throw down in there, if something happens to be in there, it might not register properly. So I probably want to do a distance thing. If the player or an enemy is within, X distance of the bullet, then, kill them. So, how do I go about this? Because most of the enemies in the player are set to react to like bullet collision and everything's handled properly. If I do like some sort of player like distance thing, then I would have to compensate for that. I don't know, can I just make the collision bigger? Yeah, that's tricky. Because right now all of my logic for the player dying is in here, and I don't want to just copy and paste this out to something. Yeah, because it's just a bounding box for the whole thing. Just to see if there is a command to do that. Well, let's not just say double, let's say increase. Yeah, that's not a bad idea. Something along those lines. Whether that works or not, I'm a little nervous because usually in games you never want to change the size of a collision on the fly because that's usually where a lot of bugs happen. I'm not sure how GameMaker handles it, so we'll just have to try it, I guess. What do I want to say? Distance? Size? Bullet explosion factor. Let's just call it factor. Alright, let's see what this does. The other thing that it might actually do is destroy the bullet before it has a chance to even get to this collision, but we'll see. It's really all going to come down to how GameMaker handles collisions. Really is. So, let's see, I probably want at least a reasonable amount of distance. You know what? I should probably turn off the enemy's ability to shoot to make this a little easier to pull off. Let's get the sped up. Yeah. Certainly a tough one to test. Hopefully that enemy doesn't get in the way. Ah! Ah, you chunk. He got in the way. Okay, well, get collision box. So collision box doesn't even exist, apparently. So much for that. Bullet collision box doesn't exist. Alright, well, you know what? I don't like that implementation anyway. Yeah, collision box just doesn't exist. Well, I'm misspelling it there, so that would explain that. But that's not really what I want to do. Because changing collision on the fly is just too risky. I wonder if you can manually trigger a collision event. Probably not, but it's worth checking. Event perform EV collision. Well, even if this page did have the information I needed, it would be in something I know Habla, so let's skip out on that. Okay. That's not a bad idea. If that does what I need it to do. We'll find out. I don't know if this is going to be enough, though. This might trigger the bullets collision event. Guess we'll find out. And I'm going to skip to the graveyard level because it's going to be much easier to test here, given that the ghosts don't get hit by the bullets unless I ring that bell. Let's get 2 bullets going. In fact, they'll only make it go faster. Maybe too much faster, unfortunately, like that. Oops. Yeah, this is a hard one to test. Let me get rid of a few of these. So let me start over. I'll just let 2 of them hit me. Just so I can cut down on the number of ghosts that are wandering around in here. Feels like he's following me. Ah. Ghosts. I've got a bullet chilling up there. Ringing the bell, so it'll probably kill the ghosts and finish off the level. Oh good. Alright, well, here's our chance. As long as old boy doesn't creep down here and screw things up. Go up there, go up there. Go up there, man. Leave my bullet alone. Stop that. Wow. This is really hard to test. Thankfully, the goat. Now he's coming back down here. Come on, man. Cut me some slack. Get up there. Yeah, just never on the right side. Alright, how about this? Let's see. Well, I guess the one thing I do know is because I'm doing it wrong anyway, I know it's not working, actually. Just realized now that I'm doing it completely wrong, because I have it now where it performs the collision once it does this, which means there's no distance or anything involved, which means this event is not doing what I want it to do anyway. So yeah, I guess I just kind of have to deal with like a distance to player thing. That's kind of unfortunate because I don't really want to do that. And I'm just realizing that gameplay-wise, it's going to be kind of weird dealing with ghosts and cowboys and things like that, and exploding bullets. So let's at least get rid of this. And this is fine, I just need it to be a little bit smaller. So I'll go with 0.25. So it's a smaller explosion. And what else do I want to do with it? I also kind of want to make it so that the ghost dodge doesn't trigger that last explosion. So that's something I'm going to need to do for all these enemies. BL power up to 1. BL bounces. So probably I don't want them to ever trigger the explosion on the bullet. Which means if it's higher than this, that level 5, the red bullet level, then I probably don't want this power up to happen. So the only time I want to trigger that dodge power-up is if these are both true. I think it's BL bounces. It's less than that. Yeah, BL bounces. So to stretch this out a little bit, if the bullet hasn't recently been powered up and it's not in the red state, then a dodge can power it up. And that's going to be the difference. And I need to do that for the enemy and for the player as well. Because otherwise a dodge is going to trigger an explosion, which is probably not a good thing. You know, gameplay-wise, maybe it's alright, but it's going to be kind of confusing for the player, so I won't implement it that way. Yeah, so now if the bullet's already red, then dodging it doesn't power it up anymore. And it explodes with just about the right amount of size. So I think that's good. That is very good. So that covers that. Let's get rid of some of these. Don't need that. Okay, so the bullets explode when they finish their red bounces. They don't cause damage, so I do need to change that. So I decided that's not a very good idea anyway. Not to mention that it's hard to implement, so 2 birds with 1 stone on that one. Pick a new node if the current one is not reachable. Yeah, it's probably worth implementing that. Let's see, that's an enemy. Step, movement calculation. Or em move is equal to 0. So right now the enemies, if they're close to the move node or if they don't have a move node, then it calculates this. The other thing I want to say is, let's see, there's a path end there. So I think I can actually do this by just saying em move node equals 0, to be honest. Because that'll trigger this. So if they have no path to where they're supposed to be going, then 1, delete that move node from their path, 2, end their path, so that when it comes in through the next step, it'll come into here and find another node. So that's actually really easy to implement. Now I just have to make sure I do it for all the other enemies. Bad cowboy, battered cowboy don't overwrite steps, so that's fine. Ghost does overwrite steps, so I have to do it in here as well. Okay, and what about bat? Yeah, bat doesn't do path movement anyway, so let's just make sure I didn't introduce some sort of bug in here. So now theoretically, if I just have like a level where the enemy tries to move onto a node that's on a barrel or something, it should probably just say, look, there's no path to that node, so delete that node and then calculate another one. So I can kind of cover myself a little bit when I'm coming down into this room and adding these like movement nodes everywhere. In fact, let's add more of these. Just to make the cowboys look a little smoother. And just to make sure I didn't screw anything up, let's check it out. So now the enemy should have a lot more options for moving around. Let's turn off their ability to shoot here. I guess theoretically, to test to make sure this works, I could just leave it on overnight or something and just make sure that none of the enemies are stuck anywhere. That's one way to do it. But it looks like they're more free to move. They're picking new nodes. They're, probably some of those nodes that I laid down are kind of overlapping these areas, but they're not picking those areas and getting stuck, so it looks okay. All right, so move that over there. And since I do have a little bit of time left, let me just, now I'm paranoid about my microphone. Yeah, it's still working. Okay. It was the F1 key. All right. So I do have a task in here to implement like the victory jingle music. So what I did was I came into a program called LMMS, which is open, I think it's open source. It's free software. And what it does, just to give you an idea of what it does, is you can come over to here, like pick instruments. If you know about music programs, probably a lot of this is familiar. I didn't know very much about music programs. I just kind of had to do it because I'm the only one working on this game. So, I've learned from Jamorian, who's been on the show a couple of times, how to do this. But, for example, all the music for the show I've made in here. You can come into here, pick instruments, for example. Let's go with something festive. So you can bring like a guitar in here. You can click on one of these things. You can start laying down notes. You can change the tempo if you want to slow it down. And basically that's what you do. You just keep adding like tracks in here. And you make your song basically. You've got effects that you can add to it. You've got like a bass line that you can make. Let's go with a standard like old school keyboard bass line here. So that if you do that at the same time, and you just keep kind of layering everything on top of each other. You can change volume, you can do whatever you want. It's a very good program. One warning is if you do use these things called VSTs, it tends to crash a lot, so just make sure you save your work a lot. But that's the way it works. What I did yesterday was I did prepare just a quick little jingle. I don't think I need that. All I did was a quick little jingle for like a victory thing. And because I want it to sound Western, I used this guitar here. So what I did, just to show you, was I used a VST plugin. Came in here. Take you on a tour of my hard drive here. Came over to here, downloaded something called DS Key Acoustic Guitar, VST plugin that was free. And that brings this up. Came into here, laid down a few notes. Something like that. And I used a really simple scale, for example. I don't use any of the black keys, just skip around to white. So just very simple, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, just really simple notes. If you don't know much about music, don't worry about the theory too much. Just kind of come in and play and you'll figure it out. That's how most people learn guitar in the first place, is just by playing around. So, You know, it's a little different from the one I already have, but it was that simple to make just a quick jingle with a guitar. And the one I actually have looks like this. So, you know, when I was done with that, I came over to here to export. You know, went over to, let's see, Project Spaghetti, BGM, and I just exported it to here. Changed it to 192, although it's not that complicated, probably doesn't need that much of a bit rate. Exported it, and I was done. I have my WAV file, which is in here. Yeah. So that's what it takes to make music. So definitely check out LMMS if you're just trying a personal project. It's not easy to make music. It does take time, especially if you're like me and you have no talent for it, but it can be done. So since I did have that victory jingle, I am going to add a BGM. Well, it's more like a sound effect actually. No? Let's call it a BGM because it is kind of a musical thing as opposed to a sound effect. And it's small enough where it can be uncompressed, but what the heck, I'll leave it at that. And I actually do want to convert this to MP3. So another free program called Audacity is what allows me to do that. So I'll come into here, grab this fanfare, and export as an MP3 file. Tengu, cowboy fanfare, Project Spaghetti, since it's the Project Spaghetti soundtrack, I guess. I'll just put in a year, genre, video game, if they've got it. Maybe they just have game. There we go. And jungle, yeah, it's a very different meaning. And did that export it for me already? Oh, that was fast. Okay, so now I have an MP3 file which does the same thing. So let's pick that one instead. Okay, and the reason is because GameMaker does handle MP3s and just WAV files a little bit differently. So I want to keep like all the background music sounds MP3s to keep it obvious what they're different. So you can see like right now, for example, the MP3 files are red, whereas like the sound effect WAV files are like green. So I've got my BGM jingle, which hopefully plays properly. Yeah. And I already have a script to play BGM music. So I think now in my room manager, which I have down here, room end, fade music. Get the feeling it's going to repeat this. Maybe I'll keep this one as it is. Keep that one as it is, and go with this sound, play BGM, and this one's called BGM Jingle. What else do I need in here? No, I guess that's the only argument I need. So it stops the current sound from playing, plays the music file I pass into it at the volume that's currently set by the player. Let's see what happens. So when I hit F4, it should play. Or not. Probably because of the timing when I'm starting a new level. Start the music, yeah, it's just the timing. Level music list. Let's just comment that out for now. And see if it plays properly. There we go. Of course it's looping, so that's no good, but at least it plays. So I think the timing that I want to do on this, if all the enemies are dead, then I probably want to play it there. And I want to uncomment this. Yeah, and I just need to kind of extend that time out a little bit there. So I need to change the global wind delay. Let's make it 1.5 seconds. Perfect. Okay, well, let's play through this level normally and see what happens. Hopefully I don't end up killing myself. Oh, I know why. I know why that didn't play. Good thing I checked. This is what happens if I set the global debug switch to 4. So, actually I want it to be here. And the difference between those two is one is just my debug switch. If I hit F4, it suddenly, jumps to the next level. I probably don't want the jingle playing there, so I just took it out of that and instead put it into the place where it says if all of the enemies are dead, then move to the next level. So it should work this time. He was a dodging machine there. Perfect. So that's my first musical jingle in there. The volume, of course, is affected by, if you go into the options screen and you change music, it's affected by this. So that's a pretty good stopping place. I actually got a lot more done today than I thought I would, unfortunately, because I had the F1 key tied to muting the mic at the first half of the show. I kept cutting in and out, so I'm sorry about that. I hope the annotations are enough to help you follow along. Do apologize for that, but I did add a bunch of nodes to the graveyard level, did make the ghost gameplay parameters so that the ghost behaves like I wanted it to. The bat also behaves like I wanted it to. The bullets do explode when they finish the red bounces, so it doesn't just look like a bug when the red bullet disappears off the screen. The enemies do pick a new node if the current one is not reachable, which makes the enemies a lot smarter. And I put that victory jingle in there, which is like the first background music to go into the game, even though it's just a short little jingle. These ones down here are probably going to take a lot longer than that because they have to loop and actually sound good, so those I'll probably just work on the side because it wouldn't be very interesting to watch me go into Music Maker and make horrible music for like 4 hours to finally get something that kind of sounds good. That's not going to be something you want to watch. I think what you saw for what I made for the jingle is probably enough to say, you know, if you want to make music, try LMMS out. This is kind of how you use it. Go to work, you know. It's probably enough information for you, and you don't want to hear the horribleness that I would be making over and over again until I got something right, because I do have no musical training. So that is episode 17. Let's think about episode 18. Bring that over. And for those of you who've seen past episodes, you know that before it used to count up here how many tasks are in here. That's because I was using a Scrum for Trello plugin. The only problem with that plugin is when you start to have too many tasks, it really bogs Trello down, so I turned it off. It is useful, maybe turn it on once in a while to see things, but that's enough. So I think what I do want to do next time is, I don't know, the movement brush up should be later. So I'll move that down. Move comments, yeah, that's not that important. And I think I want to move the music tasks down. So I think it's probably worth moving on to the desert level. So let's move that stuff up. And if it's anything like the graveyard level, it'll probably take about 2 episodes to get something basic in place. So let's actually move that out to there and start working on the desert level. So I need to make a rough background, need to draw like a scorpion enemy, which is what I've got planned. And just to give you kind of a heads up on what I'm planning with the scorpion is, unlike other enemies which dodge bullets, the scorpion will be able to kind of, you know, guard against bullets, which causes them to bounce off the scorpion. Should change gameplay quite a bit. Also, probably going to have it where the scorpion, you know, you can't hit it from the front. You can only hit it from the back, which means that it'll just constantly be able to guard like this unless you can get a bullet behind it. That should make things very, very different. And, you know, the bumpers are just going to be cacti because it is the desert. And I also have bones. You know, whether these behave differently or not, they probably should. But how I'm going to make these behave differently is something I'm going to have to think about later. And I think like the graveyard level, what I'll do is next week work on, you know, the rough sprites and then just kind of throw them into Game Maker. And then the week after that, work on actually making the gameplay. So that's going to finish me off for this episode. Let's move episode 17 over here to the done stack. And there we go. So I'll flip off the desktop. Thank you for watching. Again, you know, I've apologized 1,000 times already, but I do apologize for what happened in the first half of the show with the mic cutting in and out. I will try to make up for that with annotations on YouTube so that you can follow along. Wanted to finish things off in time for Halloween next week with the graveyard level, but next week I'll be starting on the desert level. I do this every week for 2 hours on Saturday morning Japan time, which translates to 4 to 6 Pacific on Fridays if you're in the States, 5 to 7 Mountain, 6 to 8 Central, 7 to 9 Eastern. In the States, if you're in the UK, it starts at midnight and goes to 2 a.m. in between Friday and Saturday. If you're in Japan, here with me, obviously it's 8 to 10 because you're here with me. And if you're in Australia, it usually starts anywhere from 9 to 11 depending on where you live. And if you're in New Zealand, it starts at about noon. You can, see what we're up to over at www.bluetengu.com. You can follow us on Twitter at btengu. We always announce the shows and when we're starting and, other things we're working on. You can also see any of the videos at youtube.com Blue Tengu Studio. And you can always come over to Twitch and watch the live show at Twitch TV Blue Tengu. And I hope to see you next time.